Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about 7/7 Ripple Effect by John Hill. I think the video in general, 95% good. I only have some objection. I'll talk about it at the very, very end, and it has very little to do with the case he's presenting regarding the London bombings, and more about what happens at the very end of the video, or in which he tries to talk about religion. But I have to say, I just kept being astonished as I watched this documentary. The number of similarities, and how often do we have to see this happen over and over and over in different events in which something is staged in order to get something across the line that wouldn't otherwise have gotten across the line. Let's start with the fact that a gentleman named Peter Power, working for unnamed private clients, scheduled a mock exercise on the day of the London bombings. The the mock exercise was three tube trains blowing up, followed by a bus explosion. Coincidentally, on the same day in London, three tube trains blew up and there was a bus explosion. And John Hill, who created this documentary, does a mathematical calculation. What is the likelihood that a terrorist attack of three tube bombings and a bus bombing happens on the same day as a simulation of an event that has this exact thing happening? Furthermore, the BBC staged an exercise in the previous year similar to Event 201. If those of you are familiar with COVID, there was a staged event. Sorry, not a staged event, a practice event that happened in 2019 called Event 201, in which a virus, which had come from a pig, I think, escapes and goes around the world, and they had different media and governmental representatives participating in this exercise, because that would never happen. There would never be a worldwide pandemic, potentially 6 months later, in which people would have to deal with this. Governments would have to deal with this. So the BBC, prior to the 7/7 bombings, they run an exercise in which there is a terrorist attack. So just like with 9/11 and Vigilant Guardian, which was a simulation that was happening the same day, and there were exercises happening prior to 9/11, just like with Event 201 and COVID, just like with Oklahoma City, where there's a novel written by the governor's brother in which there is a bombing of a building in Oklahoma City, and one of the characters is named Thomas McVeigh. We have clear foreknowledge. And the question is, who knew, and when did they know? Well, we know, for example, that Benjamin Netanyahu was told. He was staying in London on the day of the 7/7 bombings. He was told by Scotland Yard and by Mossad not to go out. The warning from Mossad came 10 minutes before the bombings, which is just enough time to tell Netanyahu, but not enough time to warn everybody in London. Why did Scotland Yard and Mossad know about this? And why did they not tell anyone else? Interesting coda to this, I didn't know, but there's footage in the documentary that in the Beijing Olympics, they had a London bus that slowly unfolded. I think it was just the way that it was constructed. It folded and opened out, and there were 13 umbrellas in this, but you could see, for example, that the bus was exploding if you interpret it this way. The 13 umbrellas correspond to the number of victims that died on that bus. And how is this happening in the Beijing Olympics? In part because these people are sadistic enough to want to do this in everybody's faces. And we could see a celebration like that at the Beijing Olympics all those years later. What is a London bus doing in Beijing anyway? So the big question has to be, why would Muslims do this at this time? Going back to 2005, Tony Blair was fighting a very unpopular war on terror because the British people were not as easily duped as the American people were. And if Muslims were to bomb London, this would only create galvanizing forces for the war on terror. If you don't believe in the propaganda and you are fighting this and you say, we don't want a war on terror, and then these Muslim, so-called Muslim activists bomb London, well, guess what? You're going to turn everybody against you. So it wouldn't have made any sense for them to do this. Already, public opinion was against the war on terror. And what happens? Public opinion changes. So when you look at these events, 7/7, 9/11, Event 201, which led to COVID, not led to COVID, but came before COVID, Oklahoma City, everything in these events was planned ahead of time. Sometimes it was visible, the planning, and the event itself changed the world significantly. We also see slips of the tongue. Javal Aviv, who was an Israeli, you could say, intelligence or defense consultant, wrote a book, and he's talking about a truck bomb, and he says, and it's played over and over in the documentary, a truck bomb, as we did in London. He corrects himself right after he says, as we did, as we saw in London. And obviously, Israel's fingerprints are all over this. We have CCTV cameras not working on that day. The CCTV cameras were run by an Israeli company called ICTS. ICTS not only had a office near Luton, the train station in Luton, where the bombers were originally supposed to rendezvous, and I'm saying bombers in quotes. They were supposed to rendezvous and then go. They also handled some airport security. I didn't have a chance to verify this, but the documentary claimed that they also handled airport security prior to 9/11 in the United States. So the CCTV cameras in all of these train stations are not working, apparently. Cameras were unavailable. What a coincidence, just like we saw with Oklahoma City, just like we've seen at 9/11 with the Pentagon bombing. No images available. Why? Because if the images were made available, we'd be able to see what they are, which is a big scam. So what the documentary does a really good job of explaining is that these young men were hired as part of a simulation, what Peter Power refers to as this mock exercise. So the problem was it wasn't a mock exercise, it was a real bombing, but they didn't know that. They were patsies. The strange thing is the people who planned this thought that everyone would do what they were supposed to do, and that was supposed to catch their trains on time. They didn't catch their trains on time. And if they had, then they would have been killed on the trains, but they didn't. So only one of the so-called bombers gets to Luton on time. And as such, they have to create this image, which the documentary goes into explaining how clearly doctored it is. The image is doctored. And that puts all of them into the same photo. Why is there no video? If there were video, then we would be able to see that it was doctored. The still photo, very clearly doctored. Everybody sees that. And that's because if they miss this train, which gets them to be on the tubes that they're supposed to, they get blown up with the trains. However, they miss it. They realize that something has happened, something has gone wrong with their so-called simulation, and they're later gunned down in Canary Wharf. This correlates with the bomber who, I'm sorry, not correlates. This ties together with the other bomber who did not miss his train from Luton. And he's told to take this very strange bus route. I think the number 91 bus going down one way and then getting off, then taking the number 30 bus. The problem is the number 30 bus retraces the path of the number 91 bus. However, the reason why he was directed to do this was because he then boards a number 30 bus, which takes a diversion from its regular route and goes to Tavistock Square. He is then there blown up. And so the problem is we have so many conflicting witness reports from both the tube and the bus about what happened and about who was on there. As far as the tube goes, we don't have any reports of unattended bags or Muslims. And there are holes in the floor. We have someone who actually went on a BBC program and simulated what had happened. And he pointed to the floor and he says, the explosion came from there. And the explosion came up. And the explosion was so powerful that it lifted the train up off of the tracks. As we see with Oklahoma City, the narrative is these are homemade bombs. Yeah, you can make a homemade bomb so powerful that it can collapse the front of a building. Same thing here. You're going to make a bomb at home that's so powerful that it's going to lift a train off of its tracks and derail it. No, these were military grade explosives that were pre-planted on these trains ahead of time, and then these people were supposed to be on there, and then they would be gone as well, and then they could be blamed. Oh, look, here we found this evidence, this Muslim bomber. And as we saw with 9/11, we find IDs at these locations. Suicide bomb blows apparently one of these bombers into 52 pieces, but his ID survives. It blows him into 52 pieces, but the person sitting right next to him doesn't lose any arms or legs. But other people who are sitting in other places do. So it doesn't correlate with science, doesn't correlate with reality. And in fact, they messed up. They planted one of the bombers' IDs at all 4 locations. So this guy managed to blow himself up at 4 different locations in London and leave his ID. So sloppy. I think the thing is, if you're going to coordinate something like this, you have to be really good. And the problem is, both the US and America showed themselves, their intelligence, and remember, these are the so-called intelligence forces, showed themselves to be inept, making mistakes all over the place, confessing things on television, not having things line up, making sure that there was no autopsies done on any victims. Remember, Timothy McVeigh requests that no autopsy be done on his body. But if this is a crime, why wouldn't you do an autopsy on the victims, finding out how they died? Maybe they survived for a little while and then they had a heart attack as a result of the bombing. But you have to do an autopsy. No autopsies were done. We also have a company van parked outside of the building where the number 30 bus stops in Tavistock Square, from a company called Kingstar. We then see footage of them saying later on, oh, well, on the day of the bombing, the back of the van was totally blown in. But we have a photo of that day of the Kingstar van, no damage whatsoever. Kingstar does many things, but one of the things they do is control demolitions. So clearly their company has lied, or representative of their company has lied about the damage to their van. The question is why? We also have the problem of the narrative of, as I said, the bombs blowing upwards. This happened on the bus as well. If you look at the destruction of the bus, the video shows cuts made into the bus itself. Looks like serrations, someone cutting into the bus, which allows the top to fly off. Furthermore, people testified that that specific bus, the number 30 bus with a specific license plate, had a crew of people come the day before to work on the CCTV system. However, they took 20 hours and they were an unfriendly staff who kept themselves isolated from everybody else. I don't know about CCTV technology, but I know it doesn't take 20 hours and a crew of people to service the CCTV in a simple bus. There's probably a few cameras. There's a system. You check you check the software, you check the cameras, and then you leave. It doesn't take 20 hours. So why were they there for 20 hours? Because they were planting explosives so that this bus could be blown up. One other interesting fact, which John Hill says he was not able to verify with the family, but someone else had gone up to do this investigation, is one of the bombers was given back a mostly whole body because he was killed at Canary Wharf later in the day. And the story is he was blown up into 52 pieces. But if he's blown up into 52 pieces, how is it possible that you can hand him back a whole body? And you'll see the story about the suicide bombers that were killed at Canary Wharf, totally suppressed. No one really talks about it. Furthermore, there's a coroner that gave a testimony in which he said, I went down to verify extinction of life at Edgware Station and Aldgate, and he said six at Edgeware and 7 at Aldgate. But the problem is you have to include the suicide bomber, because the official numbers reported were 7 and 8, but nothing was reported of the suicide bombers because there were no suicide bombers there. The train was blown up ahead of time. By pre-planned explosives, not by a suicide bomber. Not the destruction caused could not have happened from a homemade bomb, and in any case, those bombers were not there anyway. And we're led to believe that by this narrative, the still photo, doctored photos of them being there, etc. Just, I said at the beginning of the video that I was shocked, and I think I could just say I'm shocked at how asleep most of us have been, speaking for myself, and that all of these events are tied together with the power of mass manipulation, that we are in an era in which these things can more easily be spread out. The official story, the official government story. I would say probably going back as far as JFK, going back even further to Pearl Harbor, Nagasaki. There are other things that in time I hope to get to on this channel. But today, I think, not today, but up till now, I think we've been dealing with the most obvious ones: 9/11, Oklahoma City, and now for me, very late to the game because it happened in 2005, 7/7 ripple effect. I did not know about the details, about all the holes in the official story, all the lies, all the cover up. And John Hill is prosecuted. He then wins his case and manages to get all the jurors to watch 7/7 ripple effect, which is I couldn't believe it at the end. He then, and so I told you at the beginning that I liked 95% of the documentary. So the final 5% goes a little awry. So instead of looking at the watertight case that he's been making all throughout, convincing me, I'm sure convincing many others, looking at all the holes in the official story, pointing, and all those holes indicate something, what's behind the official story, something that's more clear. Tony Blair working with Mossad, working with other security forces, making sure that there could be an event that would turn public opinion in his favor and obviously help the people who make weapons. Do you think that the people who make weapons, things that kill people, they might be willing to do things that kill people in order to sell weapons? Think that through. And so at the very end, he then starts a tirade against Queen Elizabeth, which I'm sure you might know. I have no time. I don't really care about a Protestant monarchy in England. But he then goes on to say, you also have this artificial divide between Islam and Christianity, and he's translated a combined Bible called the King of Kings Bible, and we're all one people, and it really goes off the rails. So I realize now the third edition that I linked to has this, and probably other people have cut that out and presented the documentary as is. So I think it was probably the last 20 or 30 minutes. And he continues calling everybody cowards and spineless, etc., which is a typical British thing to do. Call people a bunch of names, don't do anything about it. Fine. I still, John, deeply appreciate what you did here. I got woken up by it. I'm thankful. I'm going to take all of that and I'm going to leave all your stuff about the monarchy and the combined Muslim Christian religion. I'm going to leave that for the crazy people. So thank you for all your other work, though. I appreciate it. And I hope the people who are watching and listening to this also take the time to do it. And when you get to the end of the video after the prosecution, feel free to turn it off. You're not going to get anything else useful there. New member Morse, thank you. I always appreciate YouTube membership, and something I've started to do recently that's been a lot of fun actually is doing just private videos for them. At first I had said I'm going to do some behind the scenes stuff and I'm going to talk to you. Obviously all the YouTube members get early releases of the videos, but now it's been fun. I did a video last week on this bookshelf and I grabbed different books and I talked about why these books really matter to me. I'm going to do hopefully more of that in the future, but thank you Morris for becoming a YouTube member, and I appreciate that. It goes to support the channel, all the different people that are involved, video editors who help do the shorts, the designers who help do the thumbnails. They have to get paid They're usually paid out of my pocket. Some of it's paid by YouTube monetization, and the other paid by members, Patreon people. So thank you for that. Antonio De La Rosa, I'm a little late. Great movie. I got kind of confused by the ending. Didn't understand the whole deal about the book he was trying to sell, but I know it's a minor thing. Yeah. And then Tony goes on to agree with what I had said. That was a bit strange. Is the least I could say about it. But look at all of these in the straight line that they are, and I would argue Waco was not orchestrated in the sense that the Branch Davidians were not working in cahoots with the U.S. government. It was just a complete collapse of discipline. The FBI were divided between the negotiation crew and the hostage rescue team, HRT, I think is what it's called. And so they were of two minds. One wanted to break in and take the hostages out, and the other wanted to talk to them on the phone and negotiate with them. But what we saw coming out of Waco was this narrative of these were a bunch of horrible, violent people. They need to be taken out. No, they were a bunch of strange people living in the middle of Texas with a bunch of guns, and they didn't pose a threat to anybody. But you had to go in and murder a bunch of women and children and then make yourself heroes about it. So this then leads us on to Oklahoma City. We also have the first World Trade Center bombing in 1995. We have 9/11. We have 7/7. And very recently, we can skip over the financial crisis because that's a separate thing, also engineered by some of the same people. Out in the open, if you want to know more about that, Too Big to Fail by Aaron Ross Sorkin, monster of a book, something like 800 pages, but you'll come out of that very clear-minded about what happened in 2008. And then, of course, COVID, the deadliest disease in the history of mankind. Get yourself a so-called vaccine. Let's change the definition of what a vaccine means. Get yourself 47 boosters. Are there any vaccines that require that many boosters? No. But I thought the boosters are supposed to help me stay immune. No, they don't. They just help you for a couple days and then it wears away. And probably something coming up. So people, after COVID had happened, people had said, oh, we're gearing up for the next one. I said, no, I think enough people found out about COVID, even my friends who, wore masks and got 47 shots. They came out of it thinking, I don't know if it was what we were told. So once you've even got the normies questioning things, you can't come up with a disease again. So I think we'll see a disease 5, 6, 7 years, another pandemic manufactured. But prior to that, they're going to go in a different direction. So what's brewing now, for example, with Russia, maybe there'll be a military conflict, or maybe there'll be a financial conflict or something else. But it's too soon to bring the disease mask back out. So we've had the disease one, maybe a financial crisis or something to do with war, military engagement, and then later on in a few years, we'll bring back out another disease. It's just a merry-go-round. But I hope that seeing this documentary opens your eyes to the possibilities, the fact that there are sinister forces, people who do not love you, who do not have your best interests at heart, who do not believe in an afterlife, who believe in transhumanism and extending their life and becoming immortals here. These are the people who are doing things like this. The thing is, they happen to be human. They make mistakes. They leak things. They are sloppy. And so the evidence is there for us to see it. Even as I say, the shocking thing was with that Beijing Olympics, effectively bus explosion, which was camouflage as a dance. But why? There's no reason for a London bus to be at the Beijing Olympics. There's no reason for 13 umbrellas to match the 13 victims. It's bloodlust ritual, humiliation, or winking. We've seen this in films in which you use public events to hide what it is to do something out in the open, to sort of gloat about what you're doing, but no one else really knows what's going on there. All right. Any questions in the chat? Anybody who had a chance to watch it, had other questions, had other talking points that I didn't cover? There was a lot to talk about. I tried to talk about as much as I could. Probably one of my three favorite things is again, the ID surviving the suicide blast. Just like Mohammed Atta's passport, he goes into the World Trade Center, passport flies out of his pocket through the exploding airplane out of the World Trade Center and then lands intact, no burn marks, no scratch marks, to be found by the FBI. And people believe this. People aren't willing to say, if they planted a passport at the World Trade Center, could that be a problem with the whole story? Same thing here. We have at least one of the bombers has ID at all four locations. That means it was planted. If it was planted, it means there was foreknowledge. If there was foreknowledge, there was foreplanning. And if there was planning, why and how? Why was Netanyahu told not to go out 10 minutes before the first bomb? These are questions that have to be asked. And the lack of answers also is its own answer. Here it is. I mean, it's 20 years later, coming up on the anniversary of 20 years since that bombing. Okay, I am going to be going live on the Palestine Bookshelf channel in about 4 minutes, talking about an Al Jazeera documentary on the 1967 war, so-called. As those of you who had a chance to watch that documentary, you'll see that it was not really that at all. But if there are no other questions today, thanks for joining. Please consider liking, subscribing, sharing this channel with people. Try to do film clubs pretty regularly. I try to do them once a week and trying to provide something different from what we're doing with our book reviews. And as I said, I'm heading over to Palestine Bookshelf. So if you're watching this live, feel free to head over there if you're interested in issues regarding Palestine, and we'll talk more on those issues over there.